Hello, everybody, and welcome to my talk. I am Robert Hamilton, as you can see here, and I am going to be talking to you about kimono and cultural appropriation. Now, one of the words there looks difficult, appropriation, but don't worry, you don't have to get your dictionary out. I'm going to explain to you what that means and how that connects to kimono. But first, let's look at these points. As you know, this is part of a series of different talks, and there will be one more in the series on the 26th of this month. You can tune in and learn about wines. So that should be fun. And if you want to learn more about or see the schedule for this, you can use this QR code. Let me get out of the way for that to get more information. And there are different things that you can do in order to get points depending on which year you are in, but especially for the first years for your English communication. If you write a report about this, then you can get your out-of-class English points and your TGL points. I am going to give you a couple of questions about midway through this talk. And if you answer those questions, then that will be able to give you a good report and you'll be able to get all of your points for that. This is also on YouTube. And to help you understand, you can turn on the subtitles by pushing this button right here, the CC button. These subtitles on YouTube are not perfect. They're automatically generated, so it makes some mistakes sometimes, but it's easier to follow along than without the subtitles. So I suggest turning that on, so that will help you to follow along. All right, so with that said, let's begin. All right, so these are kimono. You know about kimono. I'm not sure if you like kimono. Do you like them? Oh, at any time during this talk, then please feel free to comment. We've got the chat either down here if it's on mobile or over here if you're on your computer. Please comment or answer the questions as we go. You can only comment if you are signed into YouTube with your non-Toyo account. The Toyo accounts are blocked from making comments on YouTube. So if you are signed in with your private account, then please make a comment. All right, so these are two, I'd like to think, beautiful kimono, and I think so partly because I designed these kimono. These are mine. I am a kimono designer, and I have a small business. My wife and I run together. I make the designs and design the fabrics. She does the styling and runs the business, and we have a small shop in Ebis called Rokuya. And so these are two examples of my work. And this one over here, the hakama with the dahlia design on the kimono, that's being modeled by a former student of mine. This one here with the poppies going up is being modeled by an influencer, and she is 60 years old. Can you believe it? Look at that face. I think she has some kind of black magic that she uses to keep herself young forever. Here are a couple more examples of my work. This one over here is being modeled by a student from the Kyoto College of Arts. She's a styling student, and one of their assignments was to style a kimono and do the hair and makeup that goes with it. And so she was styling one of our kimonos. And this here is my wife wearing a yukata that I designed using kind of traditional Irish Celtic patterns, similar to the shirt here that I also designed. And that is printed with a traditional technique called chusen, which is kind of hand dyeing technique that's used for cotton yukata. And so you can see I love kimono. And so this topic is personal to me, and the problems that go along with uh, doing something or using something from outside your own culture, because I'm not Japanese, is also an important topic for me and something I need to be sensitive about or think about. As you can see, I also wear kimono. This is also one of my own designs. This is a banshu ori kimono. And here are a couple more. This is me in the pink wearing a hoodie and running shoes with my kimono. And this is me wearing a white shirt and necktie with my kimono. And as you can probably gather, I wear kimono, but not in the most traditional way. All of the ones that you've seen here, I've been combining kimono with aspects of other cultures. And this is the way I'm most comfortable wearing kimono because I'm not Japanese. And so to try to look traditional Japanese doesn't seem real to me. It feels more authentic, more genuine, more honest for me to combine aspects of other cultures into the way I wear kimono instead of pretending that I am a traditional Japanese person, because of course I'm not. But there can be problems with that, and some people like that idea and some people don't. And that's going to be part of what we're talking about today. So we get to the idea of cultural appropriation. So before I explain exactly what it is, I'm going to give you an example of cultural appropriation and how that applies to kimono. This is a photograph from the Boston Museum of Arts. And it was part of a program called Kimono Wednesdays. And you can see on the wall there's a painting, and that's a painting by Claude Monet, the famous French impressionist, and it's called La Japonaise. That was a painting of his wife and a kimono that he had bought for her from Japan. And she's posing in it and looking pretty. And the museum, the curators at the museum, thought it would be a nice idea to commission a copy of that kimono and let the people who come to the art gallery pose with it and take photographs. Sounds fun, right? It's fun for the art gallery. It's fun for the people going there. It makes a connection with them. And it gave money to the kimono makers in Nagoya who put together this kimono for them. So it seems nice for everybody involved, right? Fun, money, culture, great. But some people were angry. And you can see some of those people here. Look at these protesters. Look at those angry faces. They are protesting at an art gallery. This is a demo at the art gallery against Kimono Wednesday. Now, why would people have a protest against kimono? It's hard to understand. And if you look at these signs here, you can see the word racist there, the word racist. What could be racist about sharing Japanese culture? Well, we can see some other people here. There wasn't just one protester. There are protesters on two sides here. These Asian American protesters with the signs, they think that it's racist to wear kimono if you're not Asian, because it's like wearing a costume. And they feel that cultural clothes should not be a costume. And that trying to make cultural clothes pretty or sexy for fun is not respectful to the culture. So that's their main opinion. Whereas the people on this side, two of them who are wearing kimono, these are Japanese Americans. And if you see her sign there, it says, "Wearing kimono does not make me racist or an imperialist. Bring back Kimono Wednesdays." So the Japanese Americans liked Kimono Wednesday, and they liked sharing kimono with other people. And they were angry that it got canceled because of these protests, because of these demonstrators. Kimono Wednesday was canceled and people couldn't wear the kimono anymore. So they thought this opportunity to share Japanese culture was stolen from them. And so they were angry at the other protesters. So you can see this is not a simple issue. And neither of these people are being dishonest. You look at the look on her face. She's about to cry. She's upset about this. And the women on this side, they're also upset that they're not able to share Japanese culture anymore. So let's look a little deeper as to why people might be angry about this. And while we're talking about it, I've got these two questions for you. Choose one example of cultural appropriation from this presentation and explain your opinion about it. So I've already shown you one, the example at the art gallery. You can choose that or choose one of the examples I'll show you from now, and you can write your opinion about it. Or two, choose one example of cultural appropriation that is not in this presentation. So that means after you understand well what cultural appropriation is, choose one that you know about, that you've seen on TV or read about or seen in your life, and write your opinion. So let's get down to it then, so that you can write your report and so you can understand this concept. What is cultural appropriation? Well, you can see the Japanese right there, and you understand that it means stealing culture. But how can you really steal culture? Right? We share culture all the time. We eat foods from different culture. If you go and eat at a Chinese restaurant, you're not stealing Chinese culture, you're appreciating it, right? So why would that be wrong? It's difficult to understand. So let's look at an easier to understand example than the one that we just looked at. Now, this is a classic example of cultural appropriation, and one that's easier to understand why people would be angry. So these are Halloween costumes. This is cosplay. And cosplay is fine for certain things. If you want to dress up as a mermaid, that's cute. If you want to dress up as a space alien, that can be cool. But the thing is, mermaids aren't real. Mermaids are not anybody's culture. Space aliens probably are not real. And dressing up as one or a robot, that's not stealing anybody's culture. That's not imitating any real people. But Native Americans, that's what these costumes are based on, those are real people, right? And that's a real culture. And so to dress up as somebody else's culture because you think it's cute or pretty, and especially to try to make it look sexier, is not respectful. Especially if you look at the one in the middle, that's Melania Trump there. She's wearing a feathered headdress. That's part of a Native American religious ceremony. That's religion. And religion should be treated with respect. And so making these costumes, which are first not accurate, those are not really how Native Americans dressed, and using aspects of religion to be cute and sexy also is not respectful to their culture. So this is why this type of cultural appropriation is frowned upon and makes people angry. It's imitating a culture, getting it wrong, and making it seem less important. And so that's hurtful. So that's one of the reasons why cultural appropriation makes people angry. It reinforces stereotypes, right? If you're dressing up as somebody else's culture, the only way people will know what your costume is if you're just using stereotypes. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to make stereotypes stronger. And so that's a good reason to avoid that type of cultural appropriation. Second, it takes power and often money away from less dominant communities. Well, how can we, how does this sort of thing take money away or take power away? Well, that's where another example can help us to understand. These two men, these two photographs, does anybody recognize them? If you recognize, then please put a comment either beside or below and tell us if you recognize their faces. This is my dog Nashi. He wants to help out with the lecture. But back to these guys. Do you know their faces? These are two legends of early rock and roll. They helped to create rock and roll music as we know it. But I think probably none of you know their faces. This is Fats Domino right here. He wrote a song called The Twist, which was huge in the 50s. But you probably haven't even heard his name. And the other fellow here, that is Chuck Berry. And he was also huge at the beginning of rock and roll music. And he wrote songs that, both of them wrote songs that you've probably heard because they're in so many movies and such. Chuck Berry's song Johnny Be Good was in Back to the Future. That was the one that Marty McFly was playing on the stage at the old high school. And it sounds something like this. Get this here. So you listen to that guitar. That's the way rock and roll music still sounds now. This style of guitar that he basically created. But when we think about rock and roll music, when we hear the words rock and roll, these aren't the faces that pop into our heads. This isn't even the color of face that pops into our heads. We don't usually think about rock and roll music as black music, but that's the culture that it came from. It originally came from Black American culture. But the people who became really famous were people like these. Do you know these people? Does anybody recognize these faces? If so, make the comments. I suspect some of you might. This photograph here, these are the Beatles, and I'm sure everybody has heard of the Beatles. And over here, that is Elvis Presley. Even if you don't know Elvis Presley's music, you've probably heard the name Elvis and know that that's connected with rock and roll in some way. So why did they become famous? They didn't invent rock and roll. They copied rock and roll. They started making music that was associated with Black Americans, but it was easier to sell the records because they were white. That's because, you know, people at that time, and sometimes even now, were more comfortable buying records or listening to music from people that were the same color as them. And in America, generally people who were white had more money than the people who were black. And record companies wanted to sell records to people with money. So they spent a lot of time and energy promoting the white musicians. And gradually, this genre of music, rock and roll, became associated with white people much more than it did with black people. And so this was a problem because that was not sharing the genre. That took the genre away. It was no longer considered a black art form, a black form of music. And all of those millions and millions of dollars that were in record sales and concerts that these artists got, that didn't go to the black community. That went to the white community because those were the ones that were promoted more and became more successful. And then the genre was more associated with. So that's how cultural appropriation can take money away from one culture and give it to another. And usually That's because it's the dominant culture, the stronger culture, taking from the weaker culture. In the United States, that meant it was the rich white community taking more money from the poorer Black community. And that's why this type of thing often makes people angry. So, what about kimono? Is wearing kimono or making kimono by non-Japanese people, is that a kind of harmful cultural appropriation? It's difficult to say. Can Japanese culture be appropriated? Because as I just explained, it's a problem because it's a strong culture or a dominant culture taking from a weaker culture. And in Asia and in the world, Japan has usually not been a weaker culture. Japan has controlled much of Asia for large lengths of history. And so it's not a weaker culture. Plus, Japan has tried to, and sometimes forcibly, exported Japanese culture and kimono culture. So it's difficult to imagine sometimes that it would be harmful for somebody else to use a culture that has been pushed on so many people. Second, what is your feeling about kimono? Do you think it's something special that needs to be protected? Or do you think everybody should be able to access it? How do you feel when you see people in other countries wearing kimono? Does it make you feel special? Is it nice that Japanese culture is being shared? Or does it feel uncomfortable to you in some way? And lastly, how do you feel when you see people use the word kimono for things that are not kimono? Now, that sounds a little bit difficult to understand, but what I mean by that is uh, sometimes in Western cultures, the word kimono sounds nice. So it's used for things like pajamas, silk pajamas. People will say, this is my kimono, or a bathrobe. This is my kimono. They're not kimono, of course, uh, but people just like the word and it sounds elegant. How do you feel when you hear people use that? Now, we're going to look at an example of uh, a use of kimono that made some Japanese people angry. And we'll talk about why do you think this made people angry. I'm going to switch screens for this, so give me one moment. All right, so this is a scene from, as you can see from the title, the American Music Awards 2013. So just over 10 years ago, Katy Perry did a musical performance on the American Music Awards. And I'm not going to play the music because I don't have the rights to the music, and YouTube will cut my video if I play the music, but we can look at it. And you can see right away that it is Japanese themed. She starts behind the screen, and as the screen gets pulled away, she comes out in what at first looks like a furisode, the long-sleeved kimono. But we can quickly see some differences. First, right there are long slits showing her bare legs on each side of the kimonos down the sides. That's not something that's on a kimono. That's more like what we would see on a Vietnamese aozai, although even on an aozai, there would be another garment underneath, and there wouldn't be bare legs. We can also see that there's a bit at the front cut out of the chest to make it look sexier as well. And the collar is not Japanese at all. That looks more like a Chinese traditional collar. The sleeves are not correct. They only have the trailing sleeves from the wrist to the elbow, and then it becomes snug after that, which is also not a kimono. So this isn't a kimono. It's kimono inspired. And then we see these background dancers coming up now doing kind of stereotyped Asian movements with big fans. there's a torii in the background, but doesn't have a complete beam. It's the wrong shape for a proper torii. So there are a lot of things that look Japanese-ish, but don't get it right. And one of the things that made people angry about this is that the people who designed this and choreographed it don't seem to care about the difference between Japanese and Chinese and Vietnamese. It's all mishmashed together. And that seems disrespectful, because if you like a culture, you should like it enough to do some research and understand it and show it properly. So this is one of the reasons why people got angry about this. She said she loved Japan and that's why she did this. But many Japanese people said, well, if you love Japan, you should learn about Japan enough to get it right. So that was the first example there. What do you think about that? Let me pause that and get back to the PowerPoint. Give me one moment. And we are back. Oops. We're back. Okay, there we go. And I'm back to let's get back to the right slide on here. Okay, so what do you think? Was it respectful of Japanese culture? Do you think there was anything accurate in it about Japanese culture? And did you like it? I mean, not everybody hated it. Not every Japanese person hated it. Do you think it was cute? It was pretty? Do you think it was flattering that she wanted to make something that was inspired by Japanese culture? Or did you dislike it? Either way, why? What do you think about that? Now, another one that made a bit of a ruckus, this was about 5 years ago. This is Kim Kardashian. And she made a underwear brand. Now, she's a hugely popular and rich American influencer and reality TV star. And so she made her own brand of underwear. And this is what she calls shapewear. It's underwear that's supposed to make you this shape. And she called her underwear brand Kimono. Now, there's no real connection between underwear and kimono, but her name is Kim, and so she liked the name Kimono. But it's underwear, and it's using the word that describes Japan's national dress. So already that sounds a little bit disrespectful. That's already a problem. Plus, she's hugely famous and powerful in the fashion world. And so it could be possible that in Western countries, people would start to use the word kimono more for her brand than for what actual kimono is. So that's scary too. And that could be cultural appropriation, because she might be the dominant culture in this situation. So that's the second problem. But even more, she did the paperwork to copyright the word kimono for her brand. She wanted to copyright the word. She would own the rights to the word kimono. That's a problem. That's actually stealing. And so people got really angry. And this hashtag, Kim Oh No, became the #1 hashtag on Twitter when that was happening. So people were really angry. And the governor of Kyoto contacted her personally with a letter and said, please don't do this. This is our culture. And so she stopped. It's nice. There's a happy ending. The brand isn't called Kimono. She didn't finish getting her copyright on the word kimono. And so that was good. It ended well. But you could see why people got angry about it in the first place and why it had to stop. So, yeah, these are some of the reasons why people get angry about cultural appropriation. And this is why there's really, different ways of thinking about it. Not everybody agrees on what's good or bad about cultural appropriation, or what's sharing and what's stealing. So once more, I'm going to remind you of the questions for your reports. If you're working on those, #1, one example of cultural appropriation from this presentation, and your opinion. So we went through a few different examples. Some of them were kimono uh, or about music. Choose one of them, and what is your opinion about it? Do you think it was okay? Do you think it's wrong? Does it make you angry? And why? And then two, choose an example of cultural appropriation that is not in this presentation. So it doesn't have to be about music or about kimono, about something else, something that you know about, that you've seen about or read about or know from your life. Explain what it is and your opinion about it. Also, these numbers will be important for you to register and get your points depending on which year you are in. And we're going to finish off this presentation with just one more look at one of my designs and why I personally think this is not cultural appropriation. I believe this is sharing culture. This is a furisode that I designed, and you can see here, again, there is the Irish Celtic knotwork built into this design. That's from my Irish heritage on a furisode. This is on a model who is half Black Jamaican and half Japanese. And you can see her footwear as well is non-traditional. Those are not zori or geta. Those are Western heels, and it's all pulled together, but I think in a way that's respectful and sharing culture together. I don't believe this is stealing anybody's culture, but I could be wrong. What do you think about this? If you have a strong opinion about it, then you can write a message here, or you can send me an email, or even when you see me at the university, you can talk to me about these things, and I'd be happy to hear your ideas. So that's all I've got for you today. Please remember, we have one more of these talks happening this month on the 26th. And thank you for your attention.